What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake and Ethan back at you again this week. Week 6 already, Ethan, and some people's teams are hurting, to say the least. We got some bye weeks coming up, which don't help nobody when you got a bunch of injuries to deal with. And I would like to say that our list is shorter this week, but it's really not much shorter here in week 6.
No, it is not. And sadly, we do once again have to start with a moment of silence. Dak Prescott. This is the headliner, and it's a real shame. He's dealing with an ankle dislocation, compound fracture. Always a disgusting injury to watch, and of course, they replay it and they replay it and they replay it, and so you see it again and again and again, and you have to relive the stress that Dak Prescott has to deal with now. He is out for the year. Obviously, prayers up for Dak. This is a serious injury. You hate to see it. This is one where he had emergency surgery that night. They want to relocate that ankle as quickly as possible. They want to secure that fracture, make sure that it is stable. The biggest issue is that this was a compound fracture, which means the bone actually broke the skin. And when you have that, you have a huge concern for infection. And so I won't say that this is to the same level of risk as a guy like an Alex Smith, but we have to understand that infection is something that, they're going to have to watch very closely with Dak. We're hoping, he's not out of the woods yet. This is why I always say when you're trying to buy an injured player in Dynasty, you wait for the 40% rule, which is 40% of the recovery, to make sure that they get past this first initial stage. Obviously, this is, Dak Prescott is a great human being, by all accounts, a very good, obviously a very good football player. You hate to see it, but this is what we deal with. This is why I'm here. This is what happens when you're playing professional football. There's a chance that stuff like this happens. So obviously a bummer, but we got to keep pushing on.
Yeah, it was disgusting. Like you said, just one of those injuries you don't really care to see as much as they want to show it to you. But prayers up to Dak, because it's enjoyable to watch Dak play on Sundays. He's one of our top quarterbacks here every year, and hate to see him go down. But that's not where this list ends. Ethan, we got some more big hitters that we need to talk about this week. Some people got some questions on their lineups, and the first guy up here on the list is Dalvin Cook. A lot of people going, crap, because they could really use Dalvin Cook in a matchup like they have here this week.
Yeah, and sadly, I don't think you're going to end up with him. He's dealing with an adductor strain. The adductor is the muscle that pulls your leg in. It's on the inside. Sometimes you hear it called a groin strain. Groin strain is a very loose term for any type of strain that's just in the vicinity of a player's groin. So an adductor strain is a little bit more specific. He hasn't practiced yet this week, and the team has a bye coming up next week. Typically with something like this, with a star player, you're going to try to give them as much time as possible. It's Alexander Mattison week. I don't expect Dalvin Cook to play. I do expect Alexander Mattison to get a healthy workload. And so, I think that's what we're dealing with. This is just, it's a bummer, but I would rather them wait and give him, a full 2 weeks, 3 weeks almost to get ready than have them try to push him back. So I think there's, maybe a 5% chance that he plays, but for the most part, there's, it's very unlikely.
Yep, absolutely. We're firing up Alexander Mattison because a matchup against the Falcons is what you would call sexy.
Sexy.
And we know all about being sexy, Ethan.
That's
well, right. At least one of us does. Anyway, moving on. What about Diontae Johnson? I was excited for Diontae Johnson last week, and I'd like to think that some of what we saw from Chase Claypool last week should have gone to Diontae Johnson, but it did not because he left the game early with an injury. What are we looking like for Diontae Johnson?
Johnson's dealing with a back injury. This could be a rib or a back injury. They haven't been very specific exactly what we're dealing with here. Obviously, a rib contusion is a little bit better than like a true back spine issue. That could be, much a longer recovery if we're talking about a bone bruise to the vertebrae of the back itself. Johnson hasn't practiced yet this week. I don't expect him to play. Obviously, Claypool is going to be a benefactor, but don't forget that Juju Smith-Schuster gets kicked to the inside into the slot where he has really thrived in the past. So I think this is a good week for Juju, a good week for Claypool, and hopefully we're going to see Diontae Johnson back soon. That's me speaking as a Steelers fan. Obviously, I want Diontae Johnson back because he really does open up this offense.
Just a quick sidebar here, since you are a Steelers fan. Quick question. With the emergence this year of Diontae Johnson after a solid season last year and Chase Claypool, are Juju's days numbered in Pittsburgh?
I hope not, but I can't guarantee that the team won't trust themselves. Obviously, no team, I would say, in the last 10 years drafts wide receivers better than the Steelers do. The proof is just in the production. I mean, it's just hard to argue. They haven't missed very often on wide receivers. And next year's class is a pretty good wide receiver class. So while I don't expect them to just let Juju walk, I'm sure they're going to give him an offer, but I don't know if they're going to give him an offer that is going to be happy for Juju. So I would say that it's probably 50-50 right now. We'll see as this year progresses if they, make a strong pitch to him. But normally when a guy isn't signed by this point to a long-term deal, you're looking at, them hitting free agency in some aspect. So I hope he doesn't go because I love Juju, but I also have to be realistic with the situation that the Steelers are in.
I got you. I just want to get your opinion because I know you're a Steelers guy. All right, let's go on to the next guy now. What about DJ Chark? Now, DJ Chark is the favorite. What do you call him? The Binky? That's what you call him. The Binky of Gardner Minshew is one DJ Chark.
That's his Binky.
Is Minshew going to have his Binky this weekend?
I don't think he is. Chark's dealing with an ankle sprain. He hasn't practiced as of Thursday. And Chark actually has a history of ankle injuries. So when that is the case, you typically expect a longer absence. I say that an ankle sprain is one of those injuries that if you've had a few already and then you have another one, you just don't heal quite as quickly as as you did in the first two or three. So with Chark, you're dealing with somebody that, probably is going to be out this week. So Laviska Shenault obviously is a benefactor. James Robinson, he's just blown up as an undrafted free agent. And he actually went to school. He's one of the few players I actually got to see while he was in college play because he went to school about 20 minutes away from where I went to PT school. So it's very cool.
Yep. Awesome. What about the Bake Show, or we'll call him the Bake Sale? He's more of the Bake Sale this year. But what about Baker Mayfield, somebody who we've talked about here the past few weeks, maybe not on this show, but he's really kind of, morphed into that game manager type of role where he's not being asked to do too much. But to see him on the injury report makes me a little worried. What do we got with Baker?
Baker's dealing with a rib contusion, basically just a rib bruise. He came back out and basically said this week that he is still sore. And so we can expect him to be pretty limited in practice this week. But I still think he's going to end up playing. Like you said, they don't need him to be a Lamar Jackson level player as far as on the ground game. I think they're going to try to keep him safe in the pocket and just let him throw around. Maybe his upside is a little bit limited for fantasy. He might not put up as big of numbers if he can't really get that extension because his ribs are hurting. But for the most part, I think he's still going to be a fine QB2 play, and I think he'll play.
Perfect. What about AJ Green? Not a shocker to see AJ Green on an injury report, but, it was kind of crazy. I don't know if you saw it this past week when he was on the bench talking to a teammate, and people kind of read his lips, and it kind of looked like he said, "Just trade me." Now, that could have been anything, but AJ Green is not necessarily, it doesn't look like in the future of the Cincinnati Bengals. Is this injury going to set him back a while?
Green's dealing with a hamstring strain, and obviously he's had a history of these as well. You don't like to see it. I don't think it was a significant hamstring strain based on kind of how he was walking around the sidelines, walked off the field. Typically, if it's a very significant one, they have trouble walking. He was a little ginger maybe, but really not. I wouldn't say that he was in a ton of distress coming off this hamstring strain. I do think it's unlikely that he plays this week, but given his lack of production, I wouldn't really be surprised if he misses multiple weeks. They could be potentially trying to keep him healthy for trade bait. But for fantasy purposes, Green is a liability on your fantasy rosters. I am trading him in Dynasty for whatever I can get. And I'm just trying to get out from under this dude. I just don't think he has it this year.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it anyway. All right, so those were a few of the bigger names, but we got a lot of names left, so now it's time to move into our what I like. I'm actually going to read your notes right here. You said you call them the quick hitters. I mean, there's not even a hitters. It's quick hitters.
Quick hitters.
Hitters. So we're going to move into our rapid fire section because we got a lot of names to get through. And the first one we're going to start off with was, what about Cam Newton, Superman in New England?
Newton was dealing with COVID. He
COVID.
had a positive COVID test. He has returned to practice this week, and he should play this week. So good news for Cam Newton owners that you get to start him back up.
Perfect. What about Sam Darnold, if it really matters a whole lot?
Darnold's dealing with a shoulder sprain. The team has already actually announced that he won't be playing this week. Jamison Crowder is really the only startable Jet, and I don't even really feel that good saying it.
Yeah, no, I mean, last week, with Joe Flacco under center, didn't expect a whole lot, and Crowder performed okay, but literally that's the only guy in their offense right now. What about A.J. Brown? He came back this past week and looked pretty good.
He was able to return this week. I thought he played really well. He missed practice on Thursday, but you got to remember they played Tuesday night, and he is still dealing with something that is going to take a while to heal. Bone bruises, even if you can play through them, they are still pain management issues. So I think that was a scheduled rest day for him on Thursday. I expect him to be back this week. I think he's going to be playing, and I think if he's playing, he's shown that he's healthy enough that you should be able to start him.
Right. Agreed. What about Leonard Fournette in Tampa Bay?
Fournette was an emergency option last week. He was active technically, but he obviously didn't play at all. Didn't seem like there was much of an emergency. He was an emergency option, but they didn't really need him. Again, I think he's going to play this week, but I just have a hard time trusting him. Ronald Jones has put up solid 2 straight 100-yard games, and I just don't know if we can trust Leonard Fournette yet. He has to establish himself first and stay healthy before you can trust putting him into your fantasy lineups.
I think this is one of those things with him is we need him to be healthy, A, and B, it really depends on Ronald Jones and his ability to not screw something up. Missing a blitz pickup, fumbling the ball, anything like that happens, I think we see a little bit more Leonard Fournette once he's healthy. But as long as Rojo's playing the way he is right now, then yeah, I agree. He's probably going to see the bulk of the touches. What about his teammates, though? Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, they can't seem to totally get healed and healthy here this season either.
No, they can't. Chris Godwin definitely is still dealing with this hamstring strain. Evans has been playing through an ankle sprain, but hasn't looked 100%, obviously. I expect Evans to be ready this week, but Godwin, I think, is still going to come down to a game time decision. And if we don't see a full practice today, Friday, I would not expect him to play on Sunday. I think they're going to be cautious with it. Again, we've seen what happens when teams are not cautious. We see it every year. Julio Jones, we'll talk about later, is another example of that. When teams try to rush these hamstring strains, it becomes a season-long issue, and I think that they're wisening up a little bit. So I do expect Godwin to sit, but I think you can trust Evans to play.
What about Noah Fant, tight end position?
Fant's been dealing with an ankle sprain since week 4. He did get a limited practice in this week, so I don't expect him to play necessarily this week. I would still say it's a long shot for that, probably a 30% chance he plays. But if he does manage to get into the game, he's a solid tight end 2 option, which means he's going to get you 5 to 10 fantasy points. And that's pretty much every tight end week to week. That's not George Kittle. That's not Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, or Jonnu Smith. I mean, pretty much if you don't have one of the good guys, you're hoping to get 5 to 10 fantasy points.
Yeah, that's for sure. What about his teammate, though? I mean, the game for Denver and New England was pushed back from last week to this week, and now it looks like there's a chance that Drew Lock is a little bit closer to coming back. What have you heard about him?
Drew Lock dealing with that AC joint sprain. He did get a full practice in Wednesday, and I do expect him to return this week. This is obviously good news for everyone in that offense. They did not have a capable backup for Drew Lock, so we're excited as people that have Drew Lock are excited, but we're also excited for the offense as a whole. as long as Melvin Gordon stops driving under the influence. Again, we mentioned him last week, but Philip Lindsay is a guy that should be rostered in every single league because of this now chance that Melvin Gordon misses games, gets suspended. We have to have him rostered because Philip Lindsay is a solid number 2 that could potentially be a league winner if something were to happen to Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, exactly. That's something we're definitely paying attention to closely there. Now, this is maybe one of the biggest names on the list that we talk about right now. What about Christian McCaffrey? We spoke on him last week also. Is he getting close to returning?
So CMC did have additional tests on Wednesday, and reports are that the team isn't actually expecting him back this week. I was hoping that he would be ready to go, but the team has had such good play from Mike Davis. I'm not surprised that they're not really rushing CMC back. It is a shame. Obviously, we want him back for fantasy purposes, but sadly, the wait continues.
Yeah, I think had they not gotten anything from Mike Davis and they were struggling, maybe. But they're tied for the division lead. Mike Davis has played great, and they've done nothing but win since he left. So, like you said, yeah, no reason to rush him back, which is crazy to think about. You're not losing any games after losing Christian McCaffrey. But, hey, it's 2020. Stranger things have happened. What about, you mentioned him a little bit earlier, but what about Julio Jones?
Julio is still dealing with a hamstring strain that he re-aggravated in week 4. I told you back then that I did not expect this to go smoothly, and it hasn't so far. I don't expect him to be back this week. He's still not practicing, and this is sadly a trend when you see someone go out with a hamstring strain, come back and try to play, and then re-injure it. The second time around, that the length that they miss tends to be pretty substantial. So sadly with Julio and the team, I don't expect him back this week. And the Falcons really need something. So they definitely need some help. And sadly, Julio is not going to be there to give it to him.
Yeah, the Falcons are way worse than I think anybody had anticipated here in 2020. But moving on from Julio, because he wasn't handled properly, supposedly with this injury, onto a wide receiver who was really handled well by his organization. What about Davante Adams?
Adams is coming off a bye week. He is well rested, and I think he's ready to return. He was even a full participant in practice this week. You'd love to see that. Adams is going to be ready to go, so you can plug him back in your lineups. I know people are going to be excited about that, and I'm excited about it because I have quite a few lineups that need Davante Adams back pretty desperately.
Yep, that just shows, if you rest them up front and you give them the time they need, that it's possible they can come back and get back to that 100% level, unlike what they did with Julio. Last guys we have here on the list are a couple of Jets. Don't know if people care too much about the Jets. What about Brashad Perryman and Denzel Mims? Because they need somebody else besides Crowder in this offense. Either one of these guys going to be available?
Perryman is back practicing. It is in a limited fashion. Denzel Mims is back from the IR. This is more of just hey, don't forget about these two. I don't expect either of them to necessarily be fantasy relevant this week. Mims is one that I think is an interesting stash if you have the space on your bench, because obviously this lineup, this wide receiver core needs help. And Mims does have a profile that a lot of people liked coming into the league. He's a big body receiver. If there's a guy that can find a way to produce on a not very great offense, I think Denzel Mims could be it. So just kind of keeping people up to date on these two. Again, don't expect either of them to be fantasy relevant this week, but just kind of keep an eye on them, see how they're doing as the week progresses.
Perfect. Well, that was another laundry list of players here once again, Week 6 fantasy football. And I would love for these lists to get shorter and shorter as we continue, but I just don't think they're going to at this point, which is fine because the people seem to love you anyway. So just get used to it, Ethan. Get used to looking into a lot of players on a weekly basis. But like I said, we appreciate the support. This show here, the injury report, people are loving the injury report. This is something we haven't done in the past up until this year, and it really gives a lot of insight to help you make your choices on a weekly basis for your fantasy football team. Kind of gives you a little bit of an opinion on players that maybe you don't get too many opinions on, outside of the big, ESPN, the guy's not practicing. Well, okay, cool. What does that mean for my fantasy team? That's what this show is providing, a little bit of kind of like the cherry on top. Would you say that, Ethan? A little bit of cherry on top?
I mean, to me, injury analysis is always that little bit of extra juice for your fantasy teams. It's all about giving you whatever edge that we can. Obviously, if you can have someone keeping you up to date on injuries, you don't have to worry about it as much. You can make educated decisions for your fantasy lineups. We're just trying to provide an edge here at the Fantasy Headliners. That's all we're after.
That's right. That's what it's all about right there. But we greatly appreciate the support. The channel continues to grow. If you appreciate the content, if you like 13 videos a week, you found the right place. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss anything else this season. For Ethan, for myself, we greatly appreciate you. Good luck this weekend, and we'll talk to you later.